Hello and welcome to the Hello, I'm Grieving podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Julie Shaw, founder of Hello, I'm Grieving, a community where we focus on acknowledging and dealing with grief to live a full life. Our tagline, Say Hello to Grief, emphasizes the importance in mindfully and courageously acknowledging with our grief and engaging with it so we can find hope, lessons, motivation, and healing in the midst of our pain. Today, we have the opportunity to say hello to Mangda Sengvanhpheng. And Mangda is an artist, end-of-life guide, and founder of BACII, a platform that focuses on loss and grief in order to renew our engagement to life. She offers supportive services, regenerative programming, and intentional products for individuals, communities, and organizations alike. Her life and death work is guided by her Laotian last name, which means the light of the full moon, which is so beautiful. Mangda was an awarded recipient of the Reclamation Ventures Grant for underrepresented leaders making pathways to addressing grief and loss, and her work has been featured in Vogue, New York Magazine's Curbed, and by the Chacruna Institute and more. So let's say hello to Mangda. Hello, Mangda. I know that we've had some challenging issues before this, but I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so glad that we're finally being able to jump into conversation. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Thank you. So, Mangda also is actually a colleague of mine who was a part of the Pause residency program where it brought together end of life workers, grief educators like myself, death doulas, all the above, just various people, different diverse people from the end of life and grief space. And so I've had the opportunity to get to know Mangda there, but I get to have an even bigger opportunity to talk to you more about all the work that you do. So let's just start with what is BACII and tell us how that even started.
Yes, so BACII actually means blessings in Laotian, and it comes from a Lao ceremony and ritual. And so this really was my root and inspiration, pulling from my own bloodlines to really connect the cycles of life and loss and death together. This ritual is something where you give blessings to one another, and it's really symbolic of community. It's very life affirming. It's something that you do at weddings, births, deaths. It's all different forms of really marking a time and space with people. So yes, BACII, it's this online platform that I started through my own experiences with grief and loss. When I lost my mother in 2018, it just became the catalyst for all the work that I've been doing since 2019. And at that time, after I lost my mother, I really was so passionate about the ways in which that our societal experiencing our societal relationship to the end of life really I felt very isolated, very alone with my peers. No one was talking about grief. This is pre-pandemic. No one was talking about death. And as I'm just trying to navigate my own grief and loss, I didn't feel like there was anything that was really relatable or anything I could really connect with. So both the micro and macro, I was really interested in the ways in which that we understand these topics, the ways in which that we relate to others with these topics. So that's why I created BACII. It really became something that I wish I would have had. Just a perspective, a reference point, a viewpoint, something that felt very communal, relatable. And yeah, so I've been just running with BACII. And I launched it just days before the lockdowns happened in New York. So I did not expect
Wow,
any of that to
that is
happen.
some timing.
I did not
Yeah.
know. It was just like quietly in my apartment, just being like, I really want to talk about these topics. I really want to like meet other people that have had these experiences. I really just had no vision except for um, I just want to normalize and integrate and explore and understand and connect over grief and loss and the ways in which that we understand it and relate to it in our lives. My background, my Laotian father, he always spoke about impermanence. We always spoke about death. Like these things were not uncommon in my house. It wasn't weird. It wasn't taboo. So when I'm out in the world in this very Western framework,
Mm-hmm.
it's very jarring for me. So yeah, I launched it being like, we'll have that little Eventbrite, conversation. I remember the very first thing I hosted, I had my script on my computer and my voice was shaking. I was so
Oh,
scared. And since then I was doing like weekly, COVID just meetups and
wow.
doing these events, and this really became this intuitive unfolding. It like catapulted me into all of this as we were going through the pandemic. So I've been riding this entire wave since then.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
So you bring up BACII as a ritual, right? And the rituals that we perform. And this is something that I've actually been thinking about. How can I learn more about rituals,
Mm,
especially, being so, I mean, I live in the US, but I'm also very aware of the global and cultural dynamics of how we have rituals, or different communities that have rituals, and based upon how you identify. Um, I just would love to know, like, what are some of the rituals that
mm,
you can share with us, maybe that you've performed, or maybe that you're taking an interest in now and wanting to learn more about? Because I think that can be very healing for folks
mhm.
to figure out, what is a ritual that I can lean into or look into more.
Sure. I love this question, especially because I don't know why I keep going back to the pandemic, but that was one of the biggest responses because of the lockdowns. A lot of folks weren't even having their funeral
Yeah.
rituals and a lot of these end of life markings. So the topic of ritual really became, I think, a little more illuminated of how lost we feel from ritual, how distant it feels. Even growing up for me, I never had a framework. It's always been very intuitive, and I like to make it very simple and not so distant. I think simply when I think about ritual, it's really what you're putting your attention and intention to. A ritual could be just as simple as how you have your water in the morning. It could be as simple as the way in which that you make tea. It really can be that. And then it could be so elaborate with beautiful altars and monks and all of this, all the beautiful, beautiful parts of ceremony. But I just like to make it very simple for folks. So it's not scary. Some folks that I've worked with feel even scared by the word sometimes. And
By
also,
the word ritual?
yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a little intimidating. And I personally I wasn't raised in like religious communities or anything like that. So I think there's a lot that comes up with that as well for folks that may not have had pleasant experiences or don't know how to like identify their own. So I always will lean into doing your thing, your intention. Rituals can be very serious and these exact steps that need to be performed, but that's not always the type of rituals that I am. I think it's very intuitive again and what it needs to be. At least that's how I like to be. It's more fluid. And of course, there's respect to the rituals that need to be performed in very specific ways.
Yeah. Which makes me think, how do you feel? Because I'm always aware of this, on what are we appropriating? What are we, taking from other cultures or beliefs or spiritual practices? And understanding, maybe if somebody does find something from another culture or belief, what do you suggest, or maybe the proper ways that they feel like they can use that to adapt to like their needs, or emulate that in some type of way?
Yes, it's so interesting because I think before us being so global with the internet and having this access to other people's rituals and just everything that's been emerging and booming, it makes sense why so much was in tradition and frameworks. And now that we have access to so much information and different perspectives, it's so important to give reverence to credit where these rituals are coming from or where these practices are coming from. And again, intention is so important. I think it's really easy in our society to just, instantly pick and pluck and do these things. And we're not really mindful about where they're coming from, to give that reverence, that respect, that credit, and also the people. This is a very big, important, I don't even have the word right now. It's just really, really important to be doing this because we're talking about the lives that are impacted, that these practices and rituals come from, and the ways in which that we're maybe capitalizing on them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it goes deep. We're talking about human lives. I think it's so easy to forget that when we're picking and plucking and doing what we do, even if our intentions are, well intended.
Mm-hmm.
That's just always the first thing to be doing, is thinking
Yeah.
about, where is this coming from? Where are you learning this from? Who are you learning this from? How are the folks potentially marginalized or not? How are they being impacted? Yeah, it's really, really important.
Yeah. And I always like to bring that into the conversation because, I want to create an inclusive space and
Mm-hmm.
also educate folks on that
Mm-hmm.
because we can, and again, that's what I've also been thinking is what other rituals can I learn about
Mm-hmm.
so that I can honor,
Mm-hmm.
my grief and honor the life, that was lived and to be able to again kind of keep, and rituals for me is another way to be in relationship with that person, but
Mm-hmm.
then also be in relationship with myself and
Yeah.
to give myself, what I need on this in this healing process as well.
Yeah. And I think that's such a journey. Some folks are, I think it's very common for us to be looking outside and just trying to find what is helping us, especially if we're going through anything, like we're trying to, I don't know, seek this information, and we're looking around and we're taking and we're consuming. And it's interesting, at least the folks that I've worked with, how at the end of it all, they start coming back to themselves and figuring out where there may be severings in their own bloodlines or in their own traditions, their own rituals. And I think it's all okay to be using to share information, share rituals. I love sharing BACII rituals. But yeah, always going back to that accreditation and
Yeah, thank you. I want to know more about just the work that you do and how you work with people and to help guide them,
Mhm.
through that end of life. And if you can give people more information about that, because I'm sure you are witnessing a lot of grief in that process. And just for even people listening, is this is them learning about you and what
Mm.
you offer in that space.
Sure. I definitely like to start with my framework of grief and loss and support. It's very holistic. So I can't think about loss without life. And, it's very well rounded that way. So what I've been doing is I do one-to-one supportive sessions. This framework comes from contemplative care from the New York Zen Center, where it's utilizing Buddhist frameworks, but really it's just another holistic lens in which that we can approach grief and loss, how we can support people through this. So one-to-one support, groups and communities. I do a lot of grief work. I utilize practices that have worked for me, which is writing, meditation, storytelling, community, all of that I've needed throughout my grief years. And to this day, I still use all these practices. I like getting creative. We've utilized like writing and visual meditation journeys, and whatnot, and just finding different ways in which to meet people in their grief. That's why one of my friends, she's an LA herbalist. Her herbalism is called Sun Song, and we went through about a year of collaborating coast to coast on a grief potion. So it's these flower essences that we really spent a lot of time with every essence and meditating with them and working with them to create this really special blend that has been really supportive for a lot of folks. And then doing education, grief work in organizations, and just meeting people where I can through that. And yeah, I like to write about it, share about it.
Yeah, tell us more about this potion.
Uh,
I'm sure a lot of people, like, ooh, what is this? And how does it work? And especially as you mentioned, all the research and thoughtfulness and mindfulness that you put into this. Tell us about this potion.
sure.
And
And one last thing I also want to say too is I really love doing this 4-week journey with folks, which is called You Exist. And it's essentially you going through your own symbolic rebirth and death. And we use like education practices, again, community. We use, we go through our own reflections and contemplations of our relationship to loss and grief and death, and then moving them through a death meditation. It's one of my favorite offerings as well. And shadow is the flower essence potion, this grief potion, and we have 4 different flower essences that all work with opening up the heart, loosening up emotions, allowing you to really let go. Some folks have had very interesting responses to it. It's helped them cry, it's helped them move through their own grief, it's brought up different parts of seeing themselves and what they're going through in their experiences. It gives you a little
wow.
bit of this space to tend to your grief.
And what's behind that, right? Like if you can tell us a little bit about the magic of this potion, right? And that's what I think about because for me I also think about the biological pieces of it where maybe those scents and those different things might activate
Mm-hmm.
different things, whether it be in our body, in our brains, or even just in our souls.
Yeah, so we use flower essences, so everything's completely natural and holistic. And so we use a datura, and I can tell you a little bit about each of the ingredients in here.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm learning right along with
Yeah.
everyone. So
Every plant has different responses and it invokes different responses within your physical body, which is really, really, really interesting. If you just work with a flower essence, you can get one now. You can work with rose, you can work with any of these different plants that really works in specific ways. So, for instance, we chose datura, and datura is it's known as a guide through dark nights of your soul. It's known to be really compassionate and gentle, and it just helps release and shake out any kind of overwhelming feelings. We also chose ghost pipe, and this is a plant that's known as like a teacher on life and death and how to let go. It's very supportive in moving you through these cycles and transitions and thresholds. It actually gives you a little space. It's interesting. It gives you a little space, and this is where we've had so many responses of folks of being able to just kind of have a little space between them and their grief to kind of observe and understand what they might be experiencing and feeling. We used black sage, so this is kind of good for shadow work, kind of getting behind our day to day. It's really helpful for clarity and like it's a revealer of that. And then we chose rose water, so all rose plus all these plants that I love, love, love rose. It's soothing, it's comforting, it's loving, and it's really relaxing. So those are the ingredients we use, and we've been sold out, and we're doing a
wow.
new. Yeah, it's been so.
Congratulations on that,
Thank
right?
you. Thank you. It's every time we're doing a batch, we're selling out. And so we're doing a new version of it that is going to come out this late October. Yeah, so at the end of this month, we're really, really excited to share this
Amazing.
new iteration of it.
And so will this new iteration, will it have different essences in it?
There might be one new surprise.
Okay. I know you can't give everything away, but I'm just like, ooh.
Yes, but all the plants that I just shared about, we're
Uh-huh.
keeping them. They are the
Okay.
team. They are the team here to
I
help us.
love it.
God.
So good. And how do
Mhm.
how do people, I guess, like use it? Because I guess for me, I'm thinking of let's say for example, so I just went to this event and they were doing like personalized fragrances and but using these different oils, right? These different essences. And they had some that were pre-made that you're like, oh, if you like this scent, it's great. But then they had their whole like I don't know, toolkit of all these different ones that you could
Mhm.
choose from. And there was one, and I always like to, see the signs from my sister or see these reflections of
Mhm.
her back. And one of her favorite flowers was peony. And they had that scent there. And so I just said, just give me a whole bottle of that, just that by itself.
Beautiful.
And and they put it in these little roller um,
Yes.
things, and so I use it now in a way that if I'm missing her, or if maybe there's like an event that I'm going to that I want to have her with me,
Mm.
I kind of roll and dab on a little bit of that scent of that peony. And so that's why I'm just very interested in, can
Mhm.
people use it in that way like that? Or is it again connected to this ritual?
You honestly can use it in so many different ways. It's intended to be ingested, so you can do it
Oh,
in
see?
drops. Mm-hmm. So
Okay.
like a tincture where you would ingest it, you could put it in your water, your tea. You just need a few drops of it. Um, Folks have put it in baths. You can ingest it and even write or meditate with it or create art. I've heard so many things. I've had other practitioners use it in their events, which has been awesome just to hear all these beautiful responses of it. It's really lovely. And because this blend, you can really smell the rose. You can, if you'd like, you can put it on your skin. So yeah, it's pretty safe all the way around in different ways to use it. And I love how you were just saying about connecting. I'm really interested in the ways in which that people continue I don't know, their connections to their loved ones. So I think that's a really beautiful way that you do it.
Thank
Mhm.
you. Yeah, I'm always trying to find different ways that I can find that connection, keep that
Mhm.
relationship, and foster it, and then also continue to grow still in that and grow that relationship, because obviously when someone dies, and people have different beliefs, right? Like they could be taking a different form, or their body was just simply their vessel here, and it's these energies that we have, but it really is about how can I still keep this relationship? And I know that there were even moments when sometimes I think that's why doing physical things or taking this goes again maybe back to the rituals,
Mhm.
but even which now you're making me think, so thanks for listening to my rambling, but you're making me think a lot of things, is like how you said rituals can be so simple, and I guess it could be even the the way that we just talk out loud to our
Mhm.
person, right? Like it could
Yes.
be something that every morning I get up and say hello, and I say good morning, or
Mhm.
or I say good night. Like that could be a ritual that someone can use to be able to do. And like you said, keep it simple.
Yeah, and if you want to complicate, make it complicated. Whatever you want to do, I'm trying to
Yeah.
simplify life.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you're reminding me of all the ways in which, for me personally, like you're reminding me that like a prayer or a thought can be that ritual. Like I'll do that sometimes where it's like a thought to my mother or whomever, a prayer to them. I've created altars for them. I've wearing her jewelry, her
Mm,
clothes. I have her purse that I use, like
love
things like
that.
that. Yeah, there's so many ways. Writing, like I'll write letters sometimes. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of different thresholds. I've used tarot to even
Mhm.
connect dreams. You can connect your dreams sometimes. Yeah, there's a lot of ways in which that you can access that eating their comfort food.
Ugh, the eating part,
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I want to ask you, and it's a question that I've asked before to someone else on the podcast, but you bring up your mother, and I want to know, what is it that you would want people to know about your mom?
Oh, she was such a badass. she was hardcore. My mom was like, I think, yeah, I don't know how to say it, but she was a badass, like
I love
masculine
that.
woman. Oh yeah, tattoos, like did not put up with bullshit, like very direct, you know. Yeah,
I
so she
love
was
that.
really cool that way. Yeah.
Um, and do you feel like, I guess maybe like what pieces of her do you feel
Mhm.
like you carry with you?
You know, we had a somewhat challenging relationship, and I think
Hmm.
like as any young person, I don't know, as a kid, I'm just like, I don't want to be like you. And then I found myself being like, I'm like my mother in a lot of ways that I'd rather not like to admit, and things that I would like to admit, you know? And I think, yeah, I don't know what it is with time. And as we were also talking about keeping these connections, I think I'm also working through a different kind of relationship,
Mm,
having a different kind of relationship with her now.
yeah.
That's this grieving processing and time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. It's so interesting how the time has an effect on a lot of things that maybe we hadn't thought about, before, but because I know with a past guest that I've had, Barry Liner Grant, we were just talking about it's been 30 years since her mother passed. And just even still, some of the things that are continuing to come up and continuing to be like, hey, my 27-year-old self didn't know what my 57-year-old self, would be experiencing in this. And I guess maybe as I use that tagline, say hello to grief. Maybe how are you preparing yourself to say hello to grief as you continue to get older yourself?
Mm, that's a great question. I think I always go back to my practices. They've been with me throughout time. I don't know what it is about it, but it helps. So yeah, I think I'll always be utilizing my writings and art making and all my mystical and spiritual practices throughout time. Maybe that will change, but I think that's always helping me evolve my own grief, understand my own grief, grow through the grief, reflect and whatnot. Um, yeah, and I'm just thinking about future grief. How does
Hmm.
one understand it? And I could not be more grateful for all the work that I've been doing and the people that I've met along the way and have worked with. And it's so. I don't know how else to say this. I just feel so grateful because
Yeah.
I learn from other people too, and then my learnings continue to expand and evolve and change. So we'll see what my grief will be like and how I relate to it when I'm 60. Maybe I'll start over again and it'll be completely
Yeah,
new.
we don't know, right? We don't know.
I
Yeah.
could go into an entire cycle in itself where it's like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did all this work and now. Yeah. Yeah, it's the truth of the matter, and that's also, with future and trying to stay in the present is we don't know what will
Right.
happen, and but it is interesting to think about and ponder. You mentioned the
Hmm.
word, like how you go back to your practices, and you said
Hmm.
mystical, and
Yes.
so that jumped out at me,
Hmm.
and I would love to know, and maybe let's demystify the
Mm.
mystical
Mm.
and what does that mean to you? What does that look like? Because maybe people listening are saying, "Oh, that's what it is, and that's what I'm
Mm.
interested in, or that's me."
Mm.
Um, or some people are like, "I have no idea what that
Right.
is, and tell me more." So,
Mm.
tell me more, and tell us more so that we can demystify this mystical that you referred to.
I think when I refer to mystical practices, it's really me engaging with the unseen, right? So things that are unseen and utilizing tools or practices that help me engage with the unseen. Um, and I know that it can sound really scary and it can be tied into a lot of stuff that we may have been, I don't know, told, consumed, and whatnot. I grew up on the land. I didn't watch TV growing up, so I think I'm just naturally mystical. and, and we can look to nature as even being mystical. You know, we can look to energies, spirits. You know, it could go in so many directions. And when I refer to like my mystical practices, that's a lot of, I think, working with like prayers and certain kinds of meditations, tarot cards, um, altars. You know, it could be very vague, but yeah, definitely engaging in a lot of different forms of existence.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, shoot,
Really
I'm into the aliens right now. Like, I'm gonna just say it. I'm into
yeah,
like,
all of it, communing in different realities and spirits, and I've gone in all of these different directions and explored these different planes of existence, I guess you could say.
yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so interesting because I've always been open, and what you're describing to me as mystical is just your openness. Like
Mm-hmm.
your openness to just be open to whatever may be out there,
My
right?
mother was very black and white, right? Like, in
Mm.
terms of like, if I don't see it, I don't believe it. And I think I'm very much the opposite. Is like, it feels so limited for me that it could only be what's in front of me and only with these senses. So there's a lot of different things, tools, practices that you could use to explore the unseen.
Yeah, which can be
Mm-hmm.
very freeing. It can be
Yeah,
very freeing, and it just opens up so many more avenues for resources and opportunities and modalities
yeah,
of healing.
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's dive into the mystical now. I love that. See, and thank you for that explanation because I think you also made it like very approachable.
I think for me, again, it's simplifying. I think there's a lot of things on TV and movies that make like the occult to be certain things or like certain, and like, of course, there's always shadows to everything, but the things that I talk about, it feels so pure, you know?
Mhm.
It just feels so natural to be engaging in these different ways with life. And for me, actually, it's helped me immensely through my grief and my understandings and learnings, and it's expanded my understanding of it, all of this end of life work and all of this grief, in really profound ways, I would say.
Mm.
So I like possibility. I like openness. I like
Yeah.
options. I like
Yeah.
vastness, you know? This life is so vast. So it's like
Yeah.
I want to explore all of it.
What has been, and I know you've recently posted about some of your recent explorations and travels, but I would love to know, what has been that most expansive or eye-opening maybe journey that you've gone on or that you've done.
Honestly, I do feel like I get expanded in a lot of different ways in different environments. Um, and that's what's so beautiful about getting outside of your comfort zone all the time. I even can feel that in New York, living here for a while now, you know, and going to Laos, I think, was the most impactful, perhaps the most recent one too. So that's why it's really front of mind. Going to the literal villages that my family had to flee from and
Wow.
meeting all of these family members and seeing life in these ways. And for me, really, it was the land, of which I did not expect it to feel so powerful because it's such a peaceful, not very developed place. So
And did you say that was your first time going? Oh,
I've
wow.
been saving this trip my entire life. I've gone to Thailand, I've gone to India, I've gone to all these different places, but I've always waited for my father to come. And ironically, he didn't come on this trip. So I went with my extended family and I was like,
We've
and
been
I actually
planning
bought
this.
tickets right before the pandemic. I bought us
Oh.
tickets to go to Laos and it just couldn't happen. We
Mm.
China Airlines sent that ticket back. So I was like,
What?
something must be wrong right now.
Yes.
Like, what is happening?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I'm glad you were able to make that trip. When did you know that like that's what you wanted to do?
I knew that as a young age because my relationship to my father is so deep and so relatable. We're very similar in a lot of ways. And I remember just growing up where he had a language and he had certain ways of like cooking the foods that we ate and the music we listened to. Like I grew up with all of his Lao culture. But in my world, when I'm going to school and I'm doing my thing as a little girl, I'm just like, what is this? So I'd even ask him, like, can we have like school, like language school? Like, can you teach me Lao? Because obviously English is like preferred language growing up. It's like just no English. So at a young age, I just wanted to connect with him, I think, so deeply, this part of his life that wasn't there but still present. You know, I wanted to hold on to this way of being and his, yeah, his upbringing and all of it. So I
Yeah.
don't know why. My brother didn't care.
Everybody's different. Everybody's
Yeah, my
different.
brother does not care. He's cool on video games and doing his own thing. I'm just like, what is this land? What is this place? Like, tell me more. How do I say hair? You know, how do I do these things? Like,
Same, same. I'm a daughter of an immigrant myself, and my mom's from the Philippines. And so I think that it's, and I call it my homeland, because I feel like there is that lineage there, and being able to see yourself and to be able to see yourself reflected back to you from the people there, from the culture, from the land.
mhm.
All of that there is that connectedness. And I'm pretty sure there's other people, whether they go on a search like that, right? To know who they are and to be connected to that. Um, I think it's a very powerful, I've always looked at that. I was very fortunate to go at a very young age, and go multiple times to the Philippines. So I do feel like I have that connectedness. But I, like you, like with my mom, I was like, why did you teach me the language when I was growing up? And she was like, you didn't want to learn. And
Yes.
of course, it's like it's like, okay, well, and sometimes I'll play around and be like, just talk to me in Tagalog and I'll figure it out. But I don't know if this is for you too, if you were eventually able to learn the language, but um like I can understand it to a certain context, and I always make the joke that I needed to understand the language so when I walked in the room, y'all weren't talking about me.
Yeah.
And like I can
Yep.
I can
Oh, that's so beautiful. I didn't know that about your
yeah.
mother and
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. But there's also the cultural dynamic too. Um that obviously I'm raised here in the US,
Mhm.
and just how different the cultures are.
Yeah.
And I think maybe even being transparent, how the love is expressed.
Mhm.
Because that's also something that's very different. And I think especially me being in the grief space and maybe wanting a little bit more compassion from
Mhm.
someone in my life, right?
Mhm.
Is that can be hard when they express those emotions very differently. And for her it's more standoffish, right? But then I also am trying to bond with her in the because then grief brings all this up, because it's like my sister died. I have to acknowledge that my mom lost her daughter,
Mhm.
and tried to see how I could help her. But if her love language isn't the same as mine, how am I able to communicate that? And there's a lot of layers in that grief. And especially when we are talking about that cultural intersection of it. So I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, whether it's with the clients you work with or
Mhm.
just in your own personal experience.
Yes, I think that this has been brought up with clients and in grief groups, but I think we're so used to it, and it's so interesting. I think in terms of family, where it's like I think oftentimes we're constantly having to learn from each other because it's different love languages, different styles, and then you put in generations, and then you put in like cultural aspects, and that's always been a grieving period for me too, is like wanting to be loved or understood in a way that I felt like I needed to be, and never felt that it was being expressed in the way that I needed it to be, you know?
That.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That brings
Yeah.
up a lot of tension, for me, anger and rage. But underneath all that is the sadness and the grief.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's a lot for people to work through. And so sometimes it's when people just want to look at grief through this one particular lens. I think it is important for us to widen that lens so that we can see there's so many other layers. And that's why I love talking about intersectionality, period.
Mhm.
But also being able to translate that into the grief space, because grief will intersect with so many different pieces of your life, but then
Mhm.
also with different pieces of your identity.
Yes.
Um, and also it's like you are going through a shift in your identity too,
Mhm.
because you're made new. You're a new person after, I feel like, any type of tremendous loss for you, right? It's our experiences that change us.
Mhm.
And be willing to say, okay, how can I continue to grow through that change and with that change?
Mm. Mhm. I know recently I just had this thought where in my head I'm just like, oh, this is so griefy, or this is a grief. And I'm just like, is that everything is like
Yes.
a brief moment? And I was like, is it because I've just been in this space for so, or what is happening? Like, but I do find it in so many layers, like you're saying, once you start peeling back. And it's like, one, I think a cultural thing is there wasn't a word for grief, you know,
Oh,
I think
in the Lao language.
like for me at least, like we didn't talk about grief, you know, like we didn't, like we under, there's communal grieving, there's
Hmm.
rituals and practices, but like I thought that was interesting, like that there's a lot of times where there's not just like words for certain things or
Mm.
experiences. And then that's been my whole grief journey too, is like throughout time, you can have that immediate loss and then layer by layer by layer. And that's why I had this thought. I can't remember if it was this morning or yesterday, where I'm like, there's so many layers to this. It's not ending.
Yeah.
This of grief that I'm just like, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be magnificent in that same breath, right?
Yeah.
To make those connections
Yeah.
and to be able to see that. And I always say that I walk around with like grief colored glasses, or I just
Mm.
look at life through this lens of grief, not in like what people, I think, typically think of it, like, oh, everything's sad around me.
Right.
It's really kind of like it sharpens my view of life, and to be able to look at things more holistically,
Mm-hmm.
um and to take in those new perspectives. And sometimes it gets heavy, so I need to take those glasses off and I need to just be, but there can be a lot of like great appreciation and gratitude along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same way. And I will say, like, it really is important, at least for me in my work, to reference these cultural elements, these identities, these severing of ties, like, especially being born in the United States and all the history in which, like, it just goes on and on and on. Um, what I've been working with people on their grief, I, it's so important to have diverse perspectives
Yeah.
and experiences and backgrounds, because that's a lot of what I hear from the folks that I work with, is like no one is even speaking about the things that you and I are talking about,
Hmm.
and it's our lives. Like
Yeah.
it's all intertwined with these identities and cultures and the loss of even these rituals and languages. It goes on and on and on. But
Hmm.
yeah, I hear you. So maybe I've just had like grief classes on recently. That's probably what's going on. And it's the same way. It's sharpened. I loved how you said that, sharpening like my senses, and it's not as I don't know, morbid, sad, depressing. Because I'm very joyous. If anything, it makes me appreciate a lot of things.
Yes.
Love a lot of things.
Yes.
Enjoy a lot of life all the time. And sometimes like it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be grieving, it's okay to not be feeling the best, like, and like normalizing that. But yeah.
It's so good to say.
Definitely a response from me as well.
I do want to, I mean, I feel like we can, of course, I feel like I could talk to anybody forever. and it's like I will always have questions upon questions. But we will start bringing this to a close. And what I want to do is I want to ask you 2 questions that I've been asking everybody so far. And I would love to hear your answers. So the first question is, if you were to say hello to someone today who is grieving, what would you say to them?
Say hello.
Great. I love that.
Hello, and I think I don't even know if it's words. I just feel like it's presence.
That is a great answer. I love that. See, that's why I love asking these questions, because just all the different answers I get. Okay, the second question that I have for you is, if you were to say hello to your own grief today, what would you say to it, to them, however? How would you say hello to your grief? You wouldn't say you're like,
I'm here. Hello again. You know, I'm going through it too in those other ways. So it's like, yes, like I see you, I feel you, I hear you. I know I will keep tending to you. We're working through it. I think also just with a softness. I want to meet my grief right now with just a softness and in no agenda, just kind of letting my grief right now unfold and just be.
to, to create that space. Some days they do, some days they don't.
Because we're going on a lifetime relationship now, so
Yeah, so you got to get to know them sometime.
yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting too, because this is also like an activity that I do, right? Is kind of describing like what that entity is, right? And even when I've asked this question, I've seen people like gender their grief, right? And say, well, this is what I tell her, you know? And so that's also an interesting thing to like conceptualize and think about for folks is,
I've done this practice with folks where it's like draw your grief. It's like materials to make the shape of your grief. What's the shape of your grief? Yeah, mine. Yeah, my gender, it could be fluid. Maybe today it's she. I don't know, but I think definitely there's a feminineness. So it's an extension of me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Oh, let's go to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can say hello to you and to greet you. So where can they find you? Where can they look up your services? All of this good stuff.
Sure, definitely going to my website as a landing place. It's BACII.co, BACII.co. Instagram, it's _BACII. You can email me at hello@BACII.co. And it's typically where I'm at. I like to do newsletters. It's been a minute since I have. There's a medium of articles on there. But yeah, do reach out. Say hello.
All right, perfect. Thank you for that. I'm going to close out for today. And I just want to say that if grief has taught me anything, it is that time is our most valuable resource. So just thank you, Mangda, for giving your time today. Thank you for taking the time to say hello to grief today if you're listening. And there are just so many people in this world grieving the loss of someone or something. And it's not my goal to reach every single one of them. It's simply to reach one. And I hope that person is you. I hope you took at least one thing from listening today. I know I took many that helps you on your journey. And take the time to say hello to your grief today. And better yet, take time to say hello to someone else, because you never know who you will be greeting in their grief. And as always, I would love to say hello to everyone listening. So please follow me at Hello I'm Grieving on Instagram. Find me at helloimgrieving.com, YouTube, Hello I'm Grieving, everything, Hello I'm Grieving. So say hello. And until next time, I look forward to saying hello to you.